You know, whenever we hear about some amazing new medical breakthrough, there's always a story we don't see. It's not just about a genius in a lab coat. It's about a hidden rulebook. And today, we're going to pull back the curtain on that unseen code that governs all of medical research.
Seriously, think about it. Every single pill, every vaccine, every groundbreaking surgery. None of it would exist without one thing: ordinary people who volunteered for research. I mean, that's just a wild thought, right? The entire foundation of modern medicine is built on the backs of these volunteers.
But wait, if people are literally putting their bodies and their health on the line for the rest of us, there has to be something in place to protect them, right? So what are these rules? What's the line that separates ethical science from just dangerous experimentation? Well, to really get why we have the rules we do today, we have to look back, way back, to a time when there were basically none. And unfortunately, the story of medical ethics, it's a story that's written in response to some of history's absolute darkest chapters. After World War II, the world was just completely horrified to learn about these so-called medical experiments that were conducted in concentration camps. The trials of the doctors responsible for those horrors, well, they forced a global reckoning. And that moment, right there, led directly to the creation of the very first International Code of Ethics for Research on Human Beings. So out of that terrible past, a new global commitment to human dignity started to take shape. And this led to the first formal, internationally recognized guidelines, the very bedrock principles that, believe it or not, still guide medical research to this day. And the first big one was the Nuremberg Code. It laid down some incredibly powerful common sense rules. Number one, voluntary consent. You have to know exactly what you're signing up for and agree to it freely. No tricks. Number two, avoid suffering. I mean, all unnecessary physical or mental suffering has to be off the table. And number three, and this one is so important, you have the right to walk away. At any time, for any reason, no questions asked. Now, the Nuremberg Code was a huge first step, but it was just the beginning. A couple of decades later, the Declaration of Helsinki took those core ideas and really fleshed them out, creating a much more detailed guide for doctors and researchers. It's been updated a bunch of times since 1964 to keep up with the times, and it's pretty much considered the gold standard for ethical research all over the world. Okay, so with all that history as a backdrop, how do those big ideas from the past actually translate into real, concrete protections for people who volunteer for studies today? Let's break it down. So before a single person is even asked to join a study, researchers have to send their entire game plan to something called a research ethics committee. Just think of them as a totally neutral referee. Their job is to look at the whole plan and make sure it's not only good science, but more importantly, that it's ethical science. They even have the power to keep an eye on the study as it goes and can shut it down if they see any red flags. And this next one, informed consent, is way more than just signing a piece of paper. It means the researchers have a duty to explain everything. What's the point of the study? What are they actually going to do? What are the possible risks for you? And what are the potential benefits? The key word here is informed. You have the absolute right to know exactly what you're getting into. Which leads us to a pretty simple but absolutely vital calculation. Look, every study has some level of risk. The researchers have to do everything they can to minimize those risks, and they have to prove that the potential good that could come from the study for society is worth any potential risk to the volunteers. If the risk is bigger than the benefit, the study is a no-go. Period. You know, when you sign up for a study, you're often sharing some of the most personal information about yourself. So these rules are there to make sure your privacy is completely respected. Your data has to be kept safe and secure, and there are super strict regulations on how it can ever be used or shared. It's all about protecting not just your information, but your dignity. But even with this whole system of rules and referees, things can still go wrong. The immense pressure on scientists to publish papers and get funding, well, sometimes it can push people to break the most basic rules of scientific integrity. Okay, so two of the biggest no-nos here are fabrication and falsification. Fabrication is exactly what it sounds like, just straight up inventing data out of thin air. Falsification, though, that's a bit sneakier. It's when you mess with the data you already have. Maybe you conveniently leave out the results that don't fit your theory. Either way, they're both considered the cardinal sins of science. Why? Because they completely poison the well for everyone else. And then, of course, there's plagiarism. We all know what it is, but in science, it's basically stealing intellectual property. The official definition is pretty clear. It's not just copying and pasting, it's using someone else's ideas or words without giving them credit and trying to pass them off as your own original work.
So who actually gets to put their name on a published research paper? Well, the rules for that are incredibly strict. You can't just be the head of the lab who kind of oversaw things. To be listed as an author, you have to meet all 4 of these conditions, from making a real, substantial contribution to the work, all the way to agreeing to be publicly accountable for the final result.
And here's a really tricky modern problem. What happens when a big company pays for a study on its own product? Well, a major concern right now is that some of these funding contracts might actually give the company the power to block the researchers from publishing any results that make their product look bad. That is a massive conflict of interest because it could hide critical safety information from doctors and from all of us. So, all of these rules we've talked about, from the ones born out of historical tragedy to the modern guidelines about data and who gets credit, they all boil down to one single central purpose. At the end of the day, this isn't about red tape or bureaucracy. It's about making sure that our quest for knowledge never, ever comes at the expense of an individual's safety and well-being. That is the fundamental promise that science makes to every single person who steps up to volunteer. And this is why it really matters to every single one of us. We have to be able to trust what medical research tells us. That trust is what lets your doctor confidently prescribe a medication. It's what allows us all to feel safe getting a vaccine. Without these ethical rules, that whole foundation of trust just completely falls apart. But here's the thing. A rule is just a rule. It's only as good as the people and the institutions who are supposed to enforce it. And as science gets way more complex and the pressure from big money gets more intense, you have to wonder, are the rules we have now really enough to protect the truth, to protect the volunteers, and to protect that incredible trust we all place in medical science?